Time to read questions 1 to 3. Now listen to the conversation and answer questions 1 to 3. Hi, sit down please. How can I help you?
Thank you. I'm a student in the sociology faculty. I'm coming to ask for some information about renting a room in the college or near the campus. My name is Sarah.
Yes, Sarah. How long have you been here in Sydney? You are not new, I suppose.
No, I'm in my second year. I came to Sydney 18 months ago from Korea.
Where are you living now?
I live with my aunt in my cousin's room. It's pretty nice to live with my relatives, but unfortunately my cousin has finished his term and is returning from Britain next week. I have to rent a room for myself.
Yes, it sounds a little unfortunate, but I suppose it's a good chance for you to have a deeper understanding to real world.
I hope so.
Well, what sort of thing are you looking for? What we provide ranges from shared flat to homestay. And of course we have houses with gardens if you like.
No, the house with a garden is obviously out of my price range. Shared flat is not bad, but I prefer a homestay. I enjoy the feeling of living with the family.
When do you plan to begin the rent? Next week, you just said?
No, my cousin is arriving by next week, so I hope to move out by this weekend.
This weekend, okay. The main area we deal with is around the university.
Around the university, aha. Do you have anything near the northern gate of the university? You know, the sociology faculty is near the northern gate.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 4 to 10. Now listen to the conversation and answer questions 4 to 10. Yes, what sort of price are you thinking of?
Well, could you give me some idea? You know, I have no experience of renting a room. I don't know what price is reasonable, but I hope it's not over $300.
I see. Usually the homestay ranges from $180 per month.
Only $180?
Yes, to $350 depending on a number of different factors.
What does it depend on?
Well, obviously the quality of the house, the facilities and extra services.
Oh, I don't care about the quality very much, as long as it's clean. As to the facilities, I want the room with the separate bathroom. Kitchen isn't a necessity, because I don't want to cook by myself. I hope to have meals with the family if possible.
Okay, let me check the files. Yes, I think this one might suit you. It's a family house with 2 vacant bedrooms.
How about the owner of the house? I mean, is it a family or...
According to the file, it is a retired lady. She wants to find college students as tenants.
That's great! What's the condition of the rooms?
The bigger bedroom is furnished and with a bathroom, and the rent is $320 per month. The smaller one charges $250. It is furnished too, but without bathroom.
Oh, $320. It's a bit out of my range, but I think I prefer the bigger one. How about the meals?
Well, the rent includes breakfasts and suppers, no lunches, however. You have to buy your lunch.
That's no problem. I usually have my lunch in the college cafeteria.
And that doesn't cover the water bill and electricity fee, but the laundry is included.
Fine. Could you tell me the address?
Yes, it's on 323 West Park Road.
Let me get that down. 323. Okay, it's near the university. So, when can I have a look at the room? You know, I'm a little pressed for time.
The file says the landlady is in every afternoon. So this week, say Friday?
Oh, I'm afraid I can't make it then. I have a lecture on Friday afternoon till 5:30. How about Thursday?
Okay, that's fine. Would 5 be okay?
Yes, fine. Just come here.
Yes, here in the student service office. Oh, before I forget, before moving, you have to pay 1 month's rent in advance.
Really? Oh, I didn't know that before. Could I ask why?
As the deposit. You know, in case you damage the property or move out without giving notice. Usually this doesn't happen, but standing in the owner's shoes...
Yes, I understand it all. So that's $320. Okay, I'll take the money if I'm satisfied.
Well, a word of advice. Don't forget to get a receipt when you pay the deposit or rent.
Yes, thank you so much.
That is the end of part 1.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 2. Part 2.
You are going to listen to two students talking about a presentation on time management.
First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
Hi Mark, what are you doing?
Hi Lucy. Well, I'm preparing this seminar on time management. I'm supposed to do a presentation on the topic next week. Ironic, isn't it? I'm probably the worst student when it comes to time management.
I don't think you're that bad compared to some other people I know. Do you need some help with it?
Yeah, I just don't know where to start, to be honest.
When are you doing the presentation?
I'm supposed to hand in the draft on Wednesday at 11 a.m. The presentation is scheduled for 10 a.m. this Friday.
That's not too bad. This gives you the whole weekend to prepare. Let's brainstorm some ideas, shall we? Do you want to get a pen and paper to jot down some thoughts? I think you should start with a broad general statement. For example, I read somewhere that organizing time is a skill like learning to drive or tying your shoelaces. Then you could move on to discussing the common problems people have with managing time.
That's not a bad idea. One of the common problems is putting things off.
Yeah, you could also mention some common signs of this symptom, such as last-minute holiday shopping, putting off visits to the doctors or the dentist. Another problem is relying too much on your memory and not writing things down.
Do you mean not keeping a diary or a planner to plan the tasks?
That's right. For example, writing down what I need to do in a diary or planner helps me remember what I need to do and makes me more focused on the tasks for the day.
Good idea.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
That reminds me of something I've been meaning to do for a while now. Anyway, I should also include some advice on how to deal with the problem, shouldn't I?
Sure, you can talk about some ways of stopping procrastination.
I guess making a to-do list can help one focus on what needs to be done.
Definitely. Another way to deal with the problem is to prioritize and do the hardest job first, the one which requires the most effort and concentration. Also, my tutor recommended that I should break big projects into small parts with a specific goal. Having an action plan has worked for me. I usually make a list of small tasks I need to do to achieve a goal. Sometimes I just don't feel like getting down to work because a task seems too overwhelming for me to even think about. This technique helps me reduce psychological pressure if I think of a project as a set of easily achievable tasks. Don't you think?
I know what you mean. I often feel like that myself with the statistics project I've been doing this term. I'm well behind, and the deadline is next week.
I think setting deadlines and sticking to them can help one to achieve goals. You can discuss this aspect in your presentation too.
A good point. Setting deadlines can also help one become more realistic about the time it takes to do tasks.
Another point you could include is how to deal with interruptions.
Okay, I guess blocking in time to handle unpredictable interruptions can help one stay focused.
Not just that, some interruptions, such as phone calls, can be easily avoided by using answering machines, for example. Saying no, which is one of the most useful words in English, is also very effective. It can be tough sometimes, but you've got to learn to say it nicely but firmly. I think you've got enough ideas here to start with.
Definitely. Thanks a lot for your help. I just need to type the ideas up, and I think I'm all set. Do you think you can lend me your laptop for a couple of hours?
I'm afraid I can't. I've got to finish my own project.
Never mind. I'll use one at the library. You certainly know how to say no.
Learned it the hard way. Got to go now. Good luck with the presentation.
Cheers. See you later.
That is the end of part 2.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turn to Section 3.
Section 3. You will hear two business studies students discussing a presentation they'll do on an article on working effectively in groups. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 26. Now listen and answer questions 21 to 26.
So, Brad, what did you think of the article on group work?
Oh, hi, Helen. Yeah, it was pretty good, with helpful pieces of advice on how to make group work effective.
I think we were lucky to be given such a straightforward text to present at the management skills seminar.
Yeah. Actually, shall we discuss it now? Have you got time?
Sure. It's only a 10-minute presentation, so we just need to explain and then give our views on the main points raised in the article.
I'll jot down some notes. Right.
So, there are 3 main sections: I suggest we start with listening.
Yeah, effective listening in groups, because it's not something that's frequently covered on courses in our field.
No, and we should say that in the presentation.
Yeah, and also effective listening's pretty simple, you know. I don't think it's hard to learn.
Well, people think it's easy, but in my experience, most of us tend to be very lazy listeners.
Okay, I wouldn't argue with that.
Something I do think we should emphasize is the power of the listener's posture, gestures, etc., in making speakers feel respected.
Not that you're just waiting for them to finish before jumping in with your own ideas.
Uh-huh.
Okay, right. The next section is on goal setting. Let's make sure we're clear what the article says on this.
Yeah. Well, firstly, it says that all group members must be given time to explain their own goals.
That's it, yeah.
And then, did it say that the whole group should agree on common goals?
That's a bit too strong. It's more that everyone's agendas should be equally acceptable. But it does say that goals have to be realistic, you know...
Achievable within a particular time?
You've got it. That's really what the article's saying. There isn't really any point in having ideals if group members know they won't come to anything within a reasonable period. So, I think a summary covering those points will be enough for that part of the presentation, don't you?
Yeah. Now, the last section is about conflict resolution.
Actually, I thought it was the worst part of the article.
Me too.
I don't think it went into sufficient detail on the issue.
Actually, I thought it devoted too much space to it, but that it was all rather boring, you know?
It didn't mention some of the more radical theories.
Absolutely. I found that really irritating.
Right, and also I think it could have said more about conflict sometimes being healthy in groups.
Absolutely. It just mentioned rather glibly about how we should avoid thinking of winners and losers, and that quick resolution of conflict is always desirable.
Without explaining what these terms mean?
Well, it gives quite detailed definitions, but doesn't develop a proper argument.
Right. So, for the presentation, I think we just give some definitions and
then explain what we felt were the weaknesses in the article's treatment of conflict resolution.
Yeah, good.
Now you have some time to look at questions 27 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 27 to 30.
So, let's think about what we have to prepare for the actual presentation.
Well, I suppose we'll use PowerPoint, but I'm hopeless at using it, especially if it has any visuals. I really have to look into doing a course on it because I know I'll need it in the future.
Don't worry, I'm quite happy using PowerPoint and I'll put it together when everything else is ready.
That's a relief. But yes, do that later.
Okay. Now, I heard the tutor saying we have to include some well-chosen quotations from the article.
I'm not sure if we do. I'll email him to find out.
No need, I can just have a look at the specs he gave us when he set the task.
That'll be quicker.
But the tutor definitely said we have to prepare a handout to go with the talk. I'm not really sure how we do that.
Sarah did one last year.
Who's she?
She's doing the same option as me on marketing. I'll ask her advice on what to include.
Great. So that just leaves the bibliography at the end. I suppose it'll mainly be articles.
Yeah. So we'll just look on the web, and we can leave that till later.
But we've been advised against that.
Well, we could have a look through some journals in the library.
I think we should start by looking through module handbooks. I think that'll give us some good leads.
Yeah, you're probably right. So, that's all the topics.
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to Part 4.
Part 4.
You will hear a lecturer talking about the process of fossilization.
First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
The foremost exhibition in any great natural history museum is almost invariably a skeleton of a large dinosaur. Often the famous Tyrannosaurus rex, or T-Rex as it's usually known. Thus, one would think that these skeletons are plentiful, one for each museum, and more to spare in the basement. Well, here's an interesting fact. Almost every one of those T-Rex skeletons are just copies of the original fossils, and we only have 20 sets of these in the whole world. And the most complete is still missing 1/5 of its bones, and the rest are missing a lot more. And given that these dinosaurs once numbered in the thousands and existed on this earth for perhaps 3 million years, you can realize an obvious fact. Fossilization is actually an extremely rare occurrence. Fossilization can only occur when, after an animal dies, it is buried in soft mud or silt relatively quickly before the body completely rots or is torn to pieces by scavengers. Given this fact, the overwhelming majority of fossils are in marine sediment, where former marine life sank to the sea bottom, where sediment was being continually deposited. This means that we have a fairly good idea of the life in Earth's ancient oceans, but a much sketchier view of the land-based life forms. Fossilization on land needs water and mud, meaning that it is most often near ancient river sites and lakes. But it is still so rare that there are, in fact, large stretches of geological time about which we don't quite know what was happening at all. So, given that fossilization is so rare, the natural question is, what can increase its odds? Well, fossilization mostly occurs with organisms which meet 3 basic criteria. 1, they must have hard body parts, for example, shells, plates, bones and teeth. Unfortunately, the soft parts just rot away far too quickly to be fossilized. And I say unfortunately because it is often the soft fleshy features that most interest us. An elephant's trunk, for example, would not fossilize, and from the skeleton alone, we would never know the trunk was there. The second criterion for more likely fossilization is that the organism in question must have existed in considerable numbers and be spread over a wide geographical range. This simply increases the statistical probability that one of them will one day be fossilized and hopefully found. Finally, and by the same logic, the species needs to have existed on the Earth for a long time, and the longer, the better. So, these are the 3 main criteria, but there are others. Being a large size, for example, helps us to notice and discover them as fossils more easily, and being a marine organism, as mentioned, helps also. Trilobites, a strange sort of ancient crab, are a perfect example. Their body structure was one of hard plates. They existed over virtually the whole world of their time and over a huge span of geological history, over 250 million years in fact, one of the longest ranges of any creature ever. Added to this, some species could grow to relatively large sizes, and they lived in the sea. Perfect. These creatures meet all the criteria, and as a result, museums all over the world are spilling over with trilobite fossils of all shapes and sizes. As far as fossils go, they are common. So, let's think about T-Rex once again. It too basically meets all the criteria that we mentioned. It has hard parts, being the bones, had some dispersion, and had been around for a long time, although it cannot compare to trilobites in this respect. However, it does have one important advantage over trilobites. It is large, very large, which means we can discover it far more easily than many other fossils. And here's another advantage. Dinosaur hunters are a dedicated and fanatical breed, continually at work in all the likely sites of the world. Basically, us human beings are fascinated by these creatures. So much that we are always searching for them, probably more than any other types of fossil, meaning that more T-Rexes will inevitably spring up in the future, and one is certainly glad for this.
That is the end of section 4.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.